Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Carly. If you're not new here, my name is also Carly. So I've been on YouTube for a hot moment, but it's been a while since I've talked about like my favorite books of all time. Like I think the last time I did a favorites video, it must have been like over a year ago. And the wonderful thing about life, and not a lot of people know this, is that you get to read a lot of wonderful books and your favorites and your taste changes over time. And I was Googling my name the other day because I have no chill. And I love to seek out environments that actively hurt my feelings. But one of the things when you look up uncarley, it's not true, I was like trying to get a screenshot for a video, but when you look up uncarley, it's like uncarley's favorite books. Like people want to know what my favorite books are, and I have not updated you since I was a wee child, meaning a year ago. So I figured I would talk about my favorite books of all time. The books that you need to read. Like if you are looking for a good book, you are looking for a good recommendation, you need to get the hot person in your life, the hot, well-read person in your life, a good book. That's what this is. This is how to be hot and well-read. Oh, my arms hurt and they're falling. Okay, cool. I think there's 15 books here about. I tried to pare it down and I tried to give us like a diverse set of authors from all different time periods, all different backgrounds. I did actually go through and make sure that I wasn't recommending a bunch of white men. And I want you to know that I'm taking a stand on my channel against men writing. I don't think they should do it. But let's just go through it. I'm gonna try and keep this train on the tracks. We're gonna try and just go through. This is in no particular order. They're just my favorite books right now. Some of them are repeats that you've probably heard if you've watched this channel before. So let's just start. Number one, we have Happy Hour by Marla Granados. Look at the Canadian cover for this book. It's published by Flying Books here, an independent publisher, and God, it looks gorgeous. That's all I have to say about that. Now, you probably know this book. It's really been, it's like a that girl book. It's pretty popular online, but it is basically a hot girl, happy girl book. You know, it's not sad. The characters in this book, they experience some bad shit. Like they have trauma and negative emotions, but it's not like they're getting beat down by bad vibes. At the end of the day, they're glamorous party girls who are eloquent and charming, and they are just enjoying their life. This is basically told in a journal format by our main character, Issa, and she moves to New York City for the summer with her best friend, Gala. Because they are not American citizens, they can't work, so they have to figure out how to kind of like scrounge around for money. And it's about that, like the juxtaposition between like they're, you know, very poor during the day and trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to feed themselves and pay rent. And then at night, they run in these high class circles with movie stars and intellectuals and the tension between that. But it's really funny, really glamorous. The depictions of like clothes and aesthetics is just like gorgeous. It feels unlike anything I've ever read because like I said before, like it's happy. Like it's not depressing things happen, but the characters aren't depressed. And it was just really, really enjoyable. This is one of my first and only 5 stars of the year. It's so damn good. It's so funny and great. Okay. Next is a book I do not own. Well, I do own it, but I gave it to my friend Ben to borrow to read and he has not returned it. So that's Violence. And that is Shoko's Smile by Choi Eun-young. This is a collection of short stories all centering around South Korean women, and it basically deals with the tension between like their personal lives and what's going on in their personal life and political things that are happening in South Korea at the time. So, you know, whether that be gender politics or there was a big ferry accident, things of that nature, or like mental health. It's like all of those things are being discussed within the context of these women's lives. So although it is obviously a very like general experience and you learn a lot about the country of South Korea, it all still feels very like personal and specific and so good. The first story is about a young woman's relationship with her grandfather and their relationship with their Japanese exchange student. And the depiction of like that relationship between the grandfather and the main character was like so heartbreaking. It literally made me sob. And I don't really cry at books just because it's so nuanced. It's not deeply sad. It's not like these incredibly sad things happen. It's just like the human condition is sad. I like short stories a lot. I find them so sometimes like so old. Like it's very hard for me to like read a short story that feels like very modern and new and fresh. And all of these stories were so good. I just feel like now Choi In-young is like a must-read author for me. I know she recently published a novel in South Korea, and I want them to translate it immediately because I demand to read it. Then we have Memorial by Brian Washington, another book that made me sob. This novel is a split narrative of a gay couple living in Houston, Texas, I think? Yeah. Mike and Benson. Benson's narrative, basically at the start of the book, they've been together for a while, but it doesn't, they're questioning why they're still together. Do they love each other? Is their relationship working, or is it just one of convenience? Then you follow their split narratives as Benson stays in Houston. He has a flirtatious relationship with one of the brothers of a student at his school. Like, he's a teacher. And also the relationship with his family and the intersectionality between race and his sexual orientation, and like him kind of rebuilding this complicated relationship with his family. Mike, on the other hand, goes to reconnect with his father in Japan, who has been absent from his life since he was 12 because his father is dying of cancer. And both of these stories are so heartbreaking and so sad, but so funny and so real. This book made me laugh. The characters speak how people speak. Like, it's not super inaccessible. It's written very, very casually in a way that I really love. Mike and Benson felt so real. Their relationships with their families felt so real. And it was so goddamn good. Like, Brian Washington is just so talented. Everything about it just felt so real and so wonderful. Like, please read this book. Oh my God, read this book. Then we have Less by Andrew Sean Greer, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Are you gonna argue with the Pulitzer Prize? You're gonna try and argue with the Pulitzer Prize? Because you're not gonna win. This book is, I mean, obviously one of my favorites. We're talking about it on the video. We're discussing it. But this is like a book for me that makes the feat of writing seem impossible. Because I'm like, I'm never gonna do this. Like, I'll never be her, so why would I try to create? I should give up. Basically, this book follows Arthur Less. Sorry, I got distracted because I opened this. Last year for my birthday, my friend Meredith got me like an embosser, and this says from the library of uncarley, and I was like, oh, cool. This follows Arthur Less. He is an award-winning author, but his career's on the decline. One of his main serious relationships is in the past, and he's heartbroken about it. And his last boyfriend and him broke up a couple of years ago, and he just got an invite to that ex-boyfriend's wedding. And he doesn't want to go because it would seem weird and he doesn't want to be there, but if he cancels, he'll seem desperate. So instead, he decides to accept invitations to every literary event around the world that has invited him to speak or partake in a writing retreat or all these things, to be like, oh, I'm not going to be there. Like, I'm not even going to be in the country for like months. And basically it just follows his grieving of this relationship and past relationships and the decline of his career while he travels the world. Oh, it's so goddamn good. I read this like first weeks of the pandemic and was like, what is this? And it's so funny. Like, it's very heartbreaking, and a look at aging and a look at relationships and a look at like what being queer is like as you continue to age. But it's also very funny. Like, there's instances of like real slapstick comedy and misunderstandings, and I laughed like a couple times. And books, like, to me, when they try to be funny, it's like really not it. Like, it's just not what I want. But this did it in a really great way. Like, I find so often books try to be so overly dramatic and like serious and depressing, and they make me want to like end it. And this was like so great. It doesn't give me Mamma Mia vibes, but it does. Like, it's got nothing in common with Mamma Mia besides the fact that it's like, both of them deal with like very serious questions of like getting older and relationships, but also like it's fun. And that's what this is. Then we have Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. If you have been on this channel for literally more than 2 seconds, you know that I would lay my life on the line for Sally Rooney. I would literally do anything she asked. Like, to me, the restraining order is like pending in the mail because she does not want me in her general vicinity. Like, I could never handle that. This is my favorite Sally Rooney book, and the one that I'm willing to like stake as a favorite on the line, because goddamn, it's so good. And in my personal opinion, which is important and matters. Sorry, I had a tea. Okay. I left it. I've like literally never looked like I've been drinking piss more in my entire life, but you know, the crosses we bear. In my personal opinion, this is the best seller reading, hands down. Again, same with Les. The fact that a person wrote this to me is literally unfathomable, and it makes me never want to try to do anything, quite frankly. You might have heard about this one recently because it just got made into a mini-series with Hulu featuring Taylor Swift's boyfriend. I haven't watched it. I won't watch it. To me, this book is so important that I cannot watch it. Like, I can't ruin that experience, but I've had a lot of friends give me a play-by-play. Like, give me a voice notes on the iPhone, play-by-play of exactly what's happening, so I get the gist. But basically, this follows the friendship of Frances and Bobby. They are ex-girlfriends, and now they write poetry together and perform it in Dublin. Frances and Bobby become intertwined in a complicated relationship with a married couple of Nick and Melissa. Bobby and Melissa kind of have a thing going on, and she's enamored by Melissa, and Melissa is enamored by Bobby. And Frances and Nick start an affair, basically. It follows a lot more, it's told from Frances's perspective, so you see a lot more of just like Frances's relationship with Bobby and Nick, but it's really just internal and about like the power dynamics in relationships when that comes to like gender and class and age, and like how that affects the different power structures like in our relationships, and how like if you perceive someone to have more power than you, you assume that you can't hurt them. Things like that, and how relationships are, it's just so complex. And the relationship between Frances and Nick to me is like so compelling, not because I like them or think they're good for each other, but because I think the questions like of a charismatic, failing, aging man and a young woman, it's interesting. That's why it happens all the time. But like, it's so good. It's just so internal and addictive. Like, I read it so quickly because I was like, well, I've literally got to figure out what the hell is happening, you know? Okay, then we have Slow Days, Fast Company by Eve Babbitt. This is a book written in the 1960s, and it's basically like humorous essays, like auto-fiction about Eve Babbitt's life and the men that she encounters. So it's just her relationships with different men, but like taking place in the 60s in LA, and she's so funny, and they're all very different relationships. You know, one's a small town boy, one is like a big time businessman, one's an actor, like all of these different complex relationships that she's had with very, very different people, and her humorous takes on it. I really enjoyed it just because you get like the vibes of the 60s, very, very like romantic portraits of like LA in the 60s, which are gorgeous. I love reading about relationships just because I think they're inherently like one of the most interesting things about life. But also like she is the agent. She is active in all of these relationships. She's in the driving seat. She is the one that is raising really interesting questions. And I love that because I feel like so often we read books about women in relationships and they're just like, he asked me out. Is he gonna call? And Eve Babbitt is like, no, I'm whip smart and funny, and I'm controlling this at all times. Oh, it's just so good. It's like a quick read, but it's like so funny. So funny, and so inherently feminine. The way that she is funny and the jokes that she makes, they're not concerned with like being one of the boys. Oh, I'm so, crude. She's like, no, I can be feminine. I can like clothes. I can be, kind of surface level and still be incredibly smart and amused and hilarious. And I'm like, yes, you can, Eve, and I'm happy you did because I want to read about it. Speaking of funny books about muses, a recent read, 5 stars, Mr. Right is Dead by Rona Jaffe. I picked this up because Marla Granados, who wrote Happy Hour, one of my other favorite books, recommended this on Instagram, I believe. It's out of print, but you can get it on Kindle. You can find PDFs online, or just do what I did and go on eBay and find like a $10 copy and then pay like $30 for shipping. Love my life. This is a collection of short stories. Rona Jaffe is a humorist from the 1960s, and they all just follow different women. Some of them are more surreal, almost like Mona Awad-esque, where you're like, what is real? What is the reality? Like, there's one where a woman investigates a murder that happens in her wallpaper, and you're reading that and you're like, what is happening? Like, what is happening right now? But my 2 favorite ones are the novella at the beginning of this collection, Mr. Right is Dead, and the short story at the end, Reema the Bird Girl. Mr. Right is Dead is just about the narrator's relationship with this eccentric sex worker in the 1960s and this sex worker's relationship with older men and how she's trying to use her charisma and her taste and her classiness and her wit as like a means to rise in social class, but also how she like is then still defined by these relationships, just like the complexities of human life. Do you like that? She's so eccentric and so funny and so independent, and yet she needs to kind of ascribe herself to these men that have more money than her in order for her to have autonomy, but then by getting in these relationships, then she loses her autonomy. It's just like very complex, very, very funny because the narrator is like very pragmatic and serious and a watcher, while the main character, Melba, is like so eccentric and just like acts without thinking. She's kind of like a Holly Golightly manic pixie dream girl, but again, this is like through a woman's lens, so it's not like she was crazy, crazier than him, and she was just so wild and weird. It's like a look into like what these women are actually like what is a complex, interesting woman actually like. And Rima the Bird Girl is again kind of along the same lines of women like getting defined by these toxic relationships with men. I love it. I love literature that says take men's rights away. Take them away. It's basically about this girl who falls in love with married men, becomes their mistress, then she becomes obsessed with their wives and tries to transform herself into their wives. And it's like creepy, but also funny and very tongue-in-cheek and oh, so good. And again, it's like these 1960s vibes. The humor is still very inherently feminine. There's lots of discussion about like aesthetics and things that are like silly to men, of like clothes and makeup, and they're taken seriously. Like I want to read about the things that I like. Clothes, read. And I want them to be taken as like a reflection of the character. I love that shit. Okay, now we're getting into the classics. Smart girl. First, I'm gonna recommend to you a book that, if you had to take an English class in North America, you're gonna go, yeah, I fucking know this book. And that is The Great Gatsby by Zelda Fitzgerald. And that is The Great Gatsby by Zelda Fitzgerald. I'm so sorry, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Made a video on that though, if you wanna watch. I love that Zelda Fitzgerald like kind of inspired this book and helped him write it, and then he locked her in an asylum and it burned to the ground. It basically follows Nick Carraway. He moves to West Egg, which is just like this affluent suburb of New York City, next to Gatsby, who is this eccentric yet mysterious millionaire. And he basically becomes an onlooker into the lives of these rich and famous people. And basically just how like money is bad and rich people are awful people, and the American dream and like this belief of like work, get money is a fucking lie. It's so good. It's just like very interesting themes, so many quotable instances. Like there's that one where he's like, I was simultaneously within and without a watcher, and what is that one? Great Gatsby within and without quote. I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Like just some absolute banger lines. I had to read it in grade 11 and I have thought about it like every day since. I goddamn love this book. Fucking read it. Then we have Gentlemen Prefer Blondes by Anita Loos. This is a recent classic that I read that I loved. Although obviously this is written in the 1920s, although it still has elements of like older books where there's still a lot of like problematic depictions of sexuality and race and gender. This is at least told from a woman's perspective, so it might be an easier into classics if you find that the horribly offensive language and outdated stereotypes are bad. This is kind of better, but still obviously problems. And this basically follows a flapper named Lorelei and her best friend Dorothy. And Lorelei is like being entertained by this gentleman caller who's the Button King. Like he owns button factories. And he's worried about her falling in love with men in New York. So he sends her on a cross-Europe trip where she gets to go to Paris and Germany and all these things. And then she just kind of entertains men there and makes them fall in love with her and makes them buy her nice things. And it's written in like a voice where Lorelei is supposed to be like a dumb blonde, but she's also like hilarious and smart. And because she's kind of dumb, She sees the world more clearly than everyone else. It's just like a very fun, easy to read classic that's just like a romp. Like a romp, two beautiful women falling in love with men and making them fall in love with them and making them buy them shit in Europe. Like, what more could you want from a summer book, you know? Then we have The Razor's Edge by W. Somerset Maugham, another classic. God, I love this book. I've talked about this book so much on this channel, but it goes so goddamn hard. The narrator is basically like a weird W. Somerset Maugham stand-in, where he's like, yeah, I was an author, and I was seeing these people. Like, he's like kind of being like, did this really happen? Or am I making it up? It's like very mysterious and weird, but like fun. But it's basically about this family in Chicago in the 1920s and how they want things for themselves. But the things that they want are oftentimes not the things that they need. So they seek out what they want as opposed to what's best for them, and then their lives are bad. And again, if you know anything about me, every book I read is about how rich people are ass. But it's just about these people's lives over the course of like 20 years. Oh, and it's so fucking good. You should read this book. Okay, onto genres. I don't have this book, but one of my favorite plays of all time, I read it recently, is Love, Loss, and What I Wore by Nora and Delia Ephron. I recommended this in a video a couple weeks ago, and everyone's like, where the fuck do we find this online to read? I don't know. I think you can find like a PDF online. I got it at my library, and you can order it from like a Thrift Books online store. I think it's also available on Kindle. But it's a play, and it is basically a bunch of like, it's like a one-woman show, but it's with 5 women. So they're like doing monologues and scenes, and it's basically about these intense moments from their lives, and the clothes that they wore. So, you know, 2 young women getting married and talking about their wedding dress and the agony of trying to figure out what they want to wear to get married in is also like a rumination on what it means to be queer and if your family accepts you. Again, it's just like very funny in a very feminine way and treats things that I think a lot of people consider to be feminine and silly as it's dignified. Like the thought of looking at clothes as a way to communicate like moments in your life are so interesting, you know, like, because clothes are a signal of the kind of people we are. And it's all just like it's like women's stories, and it's about relationship and self-love and relationships with mothers and self. I will try to, before this video goes up, find a link in the description so you can read it if you want to, because it is so goddamn good. Oh, it's so good. Then, my favorite romance is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Penguin Random House sent me an advanced copy before it came out. I read it in like 4 days, which is fast for me. People are constantly commenting on my TikTok being like, are you Nora Stevens, the main character? Were you an inspiration? And I was like, I wish. But she's much taller than me and she always wears heels, and I don't wear heels. But I goddamn love her. This is basically about Nora, who is a kind of like cutthroat, bitchy literary agent living in New York City. And every single one of her boyfriends has dumped her because they have basically, in like the small town romance genre way, like moved to a small town a bit for work and fallen in love with like a very sweet girl. And they're like, oh, Nora, like you're kind of a bitch. I want to be with someone who's nice and doesn't care. And she's like, but I like being ambitious. I like having a career and being cutthroat. I like, you know, dressing like a badass and riding on my Peloton. Like, I'm not going to change who I am, but obviously every man I date hates that. And her and her sister decide to take a month off work and go to a small town and just have like sisters vacay moment. And while she's there, she runs into Charlie, who is an editor from New York, and they had a really bad first impression because he's also incredibly mean and an asshole. He's a fucking asshole. And then they fall in love from there. But I love this book because it's funny. It's the first romance I've read that I really identify with the main character. I feel like she's very pragmatic and real about love, and she cares about her career, and she cares about working hard. And Charlie, the love interest, I'm like, this is a real person. This is a real person who is also very pragmatic, and neither one of them have to change to be with each other. They can just like meet each other where they're at and vibe. And it's just like good. Like, it's just so goddamn good. I like read this and was like, I get romance. So thank you, Emily Henry. for giving bitchy older sisters representation in media. But yeah, those are some of my favorite books. So if you want good taste, you gotta read those. You wanna be hot, you wanna be well read, you want to surprise people with your literacy and your taste, you gotta read those books. I don't make the rules. It's the law. It's the law. But thank you for watching. All of my information will be in the description below. You wanna follow me on Instagram, TikTok. Love that, TikTok. Please do that. That's really everything. Take care of yourself.